live.
Awesome. New experiment. Dr. Steve Hassan here. Hi, everybody. When we're doing a live, so fascinating and interesting. For those who are tuning in for the first time, check out freedomofmind.com. Of course, I wrote Combating Cult Mind Control and Freedom of Mind, which Jim's story is in actually in chapter 3. And of course, the website, the courses, and everything else. So, without further ado, Jim, this is a really interesting experiment. We go back over 30 years
Yeah,
to how we met.
it's
In
crazy.
fact, you were on the receiving end of my strategic interactive approach in your family. But what I'd like to do is, Zen Master Rama was very famous a long time ago. There were datelines and all kinds of exposés, but most people have never heard of him. He was in a cult call of Sri Chinmoy, and decided he was enlightened. And I think he claimed to be an enlightened master from the continent of
Right,
Atlantis,
that's right. That was part
uh,
of his resume.
part of his BS resume. And so he was recruiting on college campuses. He had an office in Harvard Square, if I remember correctly. And he had a computer cult. He made everybody become computer people to pay him money so he would give them good energy and help elevate them. But it was basically he was having sex with all the attractive females. And but there's so much more to share. I'm going to pass it to you, and why don't you tell your story? Who were you before you ever heard of this guy, and
Sure.
help everybody know. I also wanted you to do this, Jim, aside from the fact that we met each other so many years ago, is that there's so many cults now online doing hypnosis and doing all kinds of powers of suggestion that are convincing people they're aliens from another dimension or ascended masters and everything else. So the hypnotic piece is what I think is going to be so very relevant for QAnons and conspiracy theorists and all of that. So forgive me.
No, that's okay. That's great. My name's Jim Picariello. I live in Maine, and that's where me and my family, we all live. Um, 30 some odd years ago, I was a junior at UMass Dartmouth in Massachusetts. And I was a lifelong B minus student, smart enough just to get by and just majoring in philosophy and just feeling disconnected from any kind of spiritual or any kind of a lifestyle like that. And I saw a poster at the college. It was nice and glossy and really high quality, and it said, "Learn how to meditate with the Boston Meditation Society." And so I was like, "Oh, free meditation class after school, great." So I go, and there were these two really nice um, meditation teachers. They were in suits, right, which is sort of unusual. And they started by introducing themselves and saying, "Hey, we want to teach you how to meditate." So we did just very like generic meditation, just follow your breath, let thoughts float by, real nice, easy stuff. After 15 minutes, it was really, calming. And then they started talking about historical enlightened beings, where if you meditate over incarnation or over a lifetime, you can find enlightenment where you let go of attachment and you're one with the universe and all that fun stuff. And that if you're with a Jesus or a Buddha or a Mohammed or a saint, and you are spiritually sensitive and special, essentially, you can see them actually glow gold like they do in all of the paintings when they use gold leaf to have this glow around all of these paintings. And so I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." And they were really nice. I talked to them afterwards, and I went to a few more and a few more, and really enjoyed the meditation. At some point they said, "We can tell that your spiritual or your aura vibrates at a higher level than most people," which means you've meditated over many incarnations. "Let us take you out to dinner so we can give you the spiel." And I was like, "Okay." So, and this, I was actually engaged at the time to this young woman, Allie. So, Allie and I go out to dinner. We went to, it doesn't matter. And they told us about how, again, they thought we were special and that they follow someone that they suspected or they believed was an enlightened being, and his name was Rama. And because they've gotten so much out of Rama's teachings that they would like to sponsor us to go to one of his high-end talks, which is like this, which ended up being in this incredibly fancy restaurant in New York. And so it's $500 a head, and it's formal, tuxes and gowns. And they said, but because we're giving back to the teachings, we'll pay for your $500 and help you rent a tux or whatever. And so we're excited. We're like, oh my God, gourmet meal. You know, we're juniors in college eating ramen, right? So we're on all over that. We go down, lots of nice people. Everyone's super smart, super smart. They're doctors and chiropractors and lawyers and computer programmers and like like 3/4 of everyone is a computer programmer, which was like, oh, that's kind of weird. And then after that, we eat dinner, and over dessert, this tall white guy with sort of like very curly blonde hair, afro-y, you know, leather jacket and Ray-Bans, the least guru you would ever expect, right? And he comes out and he has a microphone and he does like a 10-minute monologue stand-up routine, which I recall as being very funny, and he was very clever, that I remember. And then he says, okay, and he talked about, you know, how hard it is to practice spiritually in the modern times, right? We can't go off and hide away in caves and get rid of distractions. We're constantly being distracted. How do we use those distractions to our benefit, right? And so, so I found that all very, you know, interesting and exciting. They said, all right, meditate with me just like you do at home, but instead of closing your eyes, just have a soft gaze in my direction. So he sits, I think on a riser or on a chair, I can't remember, and they dim the lights and they play some new age music. So it's very calming. And he says, so, you know, I had this very soft gaze, like I'm just letting my eyes relax, and I breathe and I do my meditation. Within a minute, the whole room turns to gold, as in everything and everyone is inlaid with a glowing gold leaf. And I get this rush of euphoria that is just overwhelming, like overwhelming. And then after a few minutes, the lights turn back on, and he's like, not bad, right? And I turn to Allie and I say something to the effect of, were we just drugged? What is going on? And she's like, I don't, maybe. She goes, but how do you turn off drugs for everyone all at once? And I was like, that's it. I'm in for life. Right there and then. Done. Sold. And so that was my recruitment process. Steve, do you want to explain what was happening?
Yeah, so let me just start with, you know, destructive groups always use deception. So they either lie or they withhold vital information or they distort information, and they always want to like make a big net, see who shows up, and then they start, you know, honing in on who they think the person is. There's always flattery and attention that feels really special and good. I also want to say my recollection, Jim, is that there was a meditation tape.
Many.
I want to say cassette tape.
Oh yeah, lots
because it was a long time ago, before young people like, what is a cassette tape? But anyway, a long time ago, and in the meditation tape that people were supposed to listen to, I think it was 3 times a day, he puts the suggestion that when you're ready to meet your master, you will see a gold light. So you're going into a trance state in meditation, unlike other forms of meditation where you're trying to not be attached to your thoughts, you're not focusing on a guru, like you said, breathing or mantra or something like that. So there's other elements of that. I also want to talk about how special one can feel if they say, well, we're having this event. It's in another place. We're going to pay $500 for you. That brings up Cialdini's, one of his 6 principles. There's actually has 7 principles. The law of reciprocity, where if people are doing a nice thing for you, you want to reciprocate. So you're already in an influence condition to be there. And then, of course, changing your clothes to something fancy, that's also going to be influencing your psychology. And then there's this experience that you have, and a lot of people in the room are already members. And that brings up what I'm especially super interested in the last few years, which is mirror neurons and entrainment. And, when I was in the Moonies, we always wanted to create the right spiritual atmosphere, and we would always surround newcomers with true believers, although they wouldn't necessarily know they were in the family.
And just to pause for a second,
yeah,
just do 10 seconds on
please.
the Moonies were a great big cult back in the 70s.
Oh,
and 80s.
You don't know what the Moonies are?
Well, some people don't.
No, Sun Myung Moon was a Korean who claimed to be greater than Jesus and Buddha and Muhammad, and that he was going to save the world. I was recruited at Queens College when I was 19. I was honeypotted by 3 women flirting with me and saying we're not religious, and we're students, which they weren't. So anyway, they were famous for the mass weddings, and what many people don't understand is the Moonies are still very big players in the world scene. They just haven't had media coverage. So people have heard of the Washington Times. They don't know that the Moonies own the Washington Times, that when January 6th happened, the Washington Times was saying it was Antifa, or that the Washington Times was the Center for Global Climate Science Denial for 50 years, which I learned from David Lipsky's book. And that Mrs. Moon, because he died in 2012, paid Donald Trump over $2 million to do a virtual endorsement to her and the group. And lastly, the 2 sons of her who were at war with her, one has a gun cult in Pennsylvania, and he wears a crown of golden bullets, AR-15 bullets, and the other one has a gun factory. So the Moonies are still very much around and dangerous as heck. But thanks for...
Yeah, sure. So Steve, so you were involved heavily in the Moonies for a time.
I got interested in this wacko field of cults and brainwashing because I had my own unique experience, and I nearly died in a van crash due to sleep exhaustion, and had a deprogramming experience. And here I am 47 years later, 4 books later, and still trying to help educate people that the mind can get hacked. Right. Just like your computer can get hacked, your mind can get hacked through deception and through hypnotic manipulation and indoctrination. It can bypass your critical thinking, and very nice people, educated people, smart people can get into this rabbit hole and sometimes be in it for decades.
So the next step of my is that
Please,
good? Okay.
Great.
So the next step is that I listen to all these tapes. I meditate every day. Those 2 teachers that I was just talking about, the meditation teachers, one of which becomes my mentor, right? Mm-hmm. So now I'm under his wing, and he's teaching me all of these things that, Rama, named Frederick Lenz, but Rama has taught him, right? And I'm listening to these tapes, like an entire set of tapes. I'm listening to them over and over. I'm meditating for an hour, twice a day. I've learned to love running, right? I hated running before. Now I run every day. I eat better. I become a B- student to an A+ student, like that. I'm working super hard. And now I'm talking to my mother and father and friends about how I'm really, really interested in learning how to do advanced database computer programming so I can make money like in a relatively short amount of time. It was the early 90s when it was sort of like anybody could just step into it, especially then, right?
So let me just add, so many important points. So the buddy system in the Moonies, we had a senior person who would oversee us, who would teach us how to recruit, who would teach us how to pray, who would teach us how to deal with our parents, and et cetera, et cetera. This is a very common cult thing. So I just wanted to point that out. Then I wanted to say that change is incremental, and often at the beginning, there are really positive benefits. People talk about, stopping drugs or partying and becoming good students. And there's nothing wrong with that. And of
Right.
course, family and friends are like, we knew he was freaking brilliant, and now he's doing A pluses.
Right.
This meditation stuff really worked. And now he's exercising. That's even better.
I mean, my whole life I had a foot of just dirty and clean clothes on the floor, right? And so now I organized my hold on a second. Now I organize my dresser and my closet by color, and everything is rolled
right.
and organized and
Because that's what he said you have to have, is
You
a
know,
color-coded wardrobe.
And the joke I say is my Jewish mother was thrilled, So I'm talking about making money. I'm talking about, being organized and doing well in school,
Right.
being exercising, being active. And I'd wake up in the morning and feel like life is worth living. And I would just be go, go, go until I went to bed that night, right? So I learn all of these things, computer programming and everything. But all of a sudden, at some point, I start learning about how you're at a party and someone's talking to you, and you're just like, oh my God, they're just draining all my energy. Their theory is that they actually do drain your energy, right? So you have people who give you energy, and there are people who take your energy. And when you're in a relationship, as much as they're a good person and it's a nice relationship, you're kind of draining each other's energy to go further along the spiritual path. So it was just a foregone conclusion that Allie and I were like, oh, we'll break up. This is great. So we break up, she moves out. We're all happy. We split up our books, everything goes from there.
Break up a relationships.
Yep.
Warning, warning, warning.
Yep.
And if your girlfriend was really into the cult, then you wouldn't be forced to break up.
Right.
But if you're having questions or she wants time, you're always going to meetings and you're always doing this, then they tell you she's bad for your spiritual journey.
Right.
So you really need to focus, because you are so special, and the world needs you, and you're part of this elite team of people who are going to elevate the energy level of planet Earth.
Yeah, we were both at one meeting that we'd go to every week, and it wasn't with Lenz. He was going all over the country. It was with all the mentors. And we both left, and within the same minute, we were like, you know what, we should totally break up. That would be so much better. So they must have said something that just went in like propaganda and worked out, so it seemed like it was our decision.
Illusion of choice. That's another key variable with mind control. And I just want to say, the old model of brainwashing that people think of as Patty Hearst, where she's kidnapped, put in a closet, and coerced. Mind control is much more subtle, deceptive, where you think you're making the decisions, but in fact, everything's orchestrated for you to go step by step into the cult.
Right. Absolutely. And so, and what Steve was saying earlier about Rama's theory of modern spirituality is that, he gives us energy so we can meditate at a higher level than most people. Like, he's one of the 6 or 10 people on the planet that has this sort of enlightened, energy. He gives us the energy since we're his monks, right? And that makes us meditate better. And because we meditate better, then in our computer programming jobs, because our minds are focused to a point, that computer programming, according to him, is very similar to high meditative states, because you're so focused. So you meditate better, you program computers better, which helps your meditation. And because we live in a modern society, and like I said, you can't go into a cave to become enlightened anymore, the amount of money that you make demonstrates how well you can meditate, the money you make from computer programming. So that shows you where you're on the level of spirituality by how much money you're making. And since we're monks and we live simply, we give the money to him as an offering. And he gives us more energy because of it. And it goes around and around and around.
So am I remembering your former cult correctly, that he told people to get a post office box and a voicemail system so family and friends
Right.
couldn't know where you were?
Right. And that's the next
It's
step
another
from,
information
well, no,
control
no,
piece.
yeah, but if you're, if people at a party are draining you because they just drain you, well, imagine that your family knows who you used to be, and you're now moving past that. So they're going to try to subconsciously pull you back, which psychologically isn't totally wrong. But this is a different situation where they say they're just going to be in your way. We're trying to save the planet. We're trying to save humanity from evil entities, and it just goes on and on. The best thing to do is to detach from your friends and family who knew you before. And eventually that propaganda starts to work in, and their suggestions of like, it's easier if you just have a PO box, or why don't you just get a beeper or a cell phone? It wasn't cell phone time. It was just get a beeper.
Right.
And then, go ahead.
So I have a question. So I was in my cult for I think about 6 months before I learned about demons possessing us. How long were you in before you learned about, evil entities and needing Rama to protect you from?
I think that was relatively early on, was vaguely stated as in, if you're spiritual, just like you might believe in angels or some sort of positive, entities that are in the world, there are also ones that aren't like demons, but they do suck all of your energy out. So we need to, and they would go into historical, Native American or Japanese or other sort of belief systems that believe that, and then there are cleansing ways you can kind of, get rid of all the things.
Oh, they are. Cults love to quote other traditions and other, like my cult loved to quote Einstein all the time, even though Einstein would have rolled over in his grave to think about the Moonies cult. But yeah, so I guess I want to just say, as people are listening to this, um, the parallels now are with the internet, but and multi-level marketing groups where you're recruiting other people, and then you're giving it up to the vision of the group leader. But I guess I also want to say you didn't really know he was in a cult before, Sri
No, he explained it.
Chinmoy.
Yeah, he was just saying, "Oh, I was in another group, and then came to find out that I was the enlightened one."
Yeah, so that's another piece I want to just comment on because I see it all the time, and that is that a lot of the public thinks that cult leaders are just con artists who say one day, I want a lot of power, money, and sex, so I'm going to start a cult. And my experience is it's more like people were raised in an authoritarian cult or family. They got programmed, they got away, but never understood that that wasn't healthy or whatever. And then they go on, or they cult hop from one to the next. But a certain percentage go, I can do this. I had this insight and that we're all one. And anyway, I like the attention and the adulation. I like everyone just looking up to me and wanting me to teach them.
And it probably doesn't hurt if you're a sociopath too.
Yeah, and have no conscience, no empathy, a narcissist, etc. Didn't he also claim to be like a martial artist?
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
he
yeah.
was
And,
like totally bogus.
well, so yeah, so there are a couple of pieces I want to say.
And then I want you to
Yeah.
talk about the Dateline also
Yeah, yeah.
after we talk about how you came
So
to realize.
one of the key things that I did miss, and I think you'll have something obviously to say on this, is that version of meditation that I learned on day one, which is just classic, watch your breath, let thoughts float by, don't have attachments, changed into, now that you're protected by Rama's energy while you meditate, you have the flexibility now that when a negative thought comes in, any negative thought, especially if it's about the group or Rama, that's not your thought. That's a thought from someone up to 300 miles away that's having a negative thought, or a negative thought from Rama, since we're all psychically sensitive now with his energy. So while you're meditating, take that thought and just push it out. You don't need it. So now, tell me if I'm wrong, I'm in an altered state, healthy or otherwise, normally, And while I'm there in the sort of subconscious connected state, I'm taking negative thoughts and I'm practicing just pushing them out, pushing them out.
Thought stopping is the technical term, and thought stopping is basically a cognitive behavioral technique that can be used ethically with a therapist who, if they realize that you are depressed, but you have nothing going wrong in your life, but you just have these recurring negative thoughts about yourself, you can teach a person to stop the thought and say a positive thought about yourself. The way mind control cults do is, the way they frame it is, any positive thought that says, I'm the Messiah, or I'm enlightened, and this is the truth, and you should commit your life to it, this is spiritually elevated stuff. And any negative thought, like this sucks, or he just lied, or he was just being hypocritical, that's someone else, that's some demon or some lower energy thought. So you want to pray, meditate, chant to get rid of that negative thought. And so what happens with mind control cults is this, what I call this dual identity model, the old Steve Hassan and then the Mooney Steve Hassan. The Mooney Steve Hassan takes executive control and thinks he's evil and bad and wants to suppress any of his thoughts and feelings and needs, right? Mm-hmm. To be dependent and obedient on the enlightened master. So
awesome. So, all right. So now we're in a state where I'm acting like Rama. I'm thinking like Rama. It's all Rama all day, every day. And I decide that I'm wasting my time at school. I can learn computer programming on my own. So with 4 classes to go, I quit college. Now I've broken up, obviously, from my fiance. I've quit college. I'm months away. I'm going to save.
Your family's freaking out. He's quitting school.
And so I have so many pieces to tell, but 2 big pieces. So I go to my mother and I say, listen, Mom, because I'm still kind of in contact, even though I'm planning to detach or move away to New York forever and never see them again. I say to her, hey, listen, there's this organization called the Cult Awareness Network, which was just a nonprofit that would give people information packets about cults way back when. And
before it got taken over by Scientology, right, and is a bad entity now.
Right. So I was told that they actually will get your parents to pay them to violently deprogram you, and where you won't even remember that Rama ever existed. So that's what the Rama people told me. And so stay away from the Cult Awareness Network. And again, they're this little hole in the wall office that makes photocopies. And so I tell my mother, if you get a call from the Cult Awareness Network, do not respond, just hang up. And she was like, okay, fine. And I walk out and she's like, Cult Awareness Network, that sounds like an okay organization. Calls them up and says, is Rama a cult? And they were like, oh yeah, sent her a packet that thick about everything that, and so she's freaking out. So she then, and I'll let me jump to another one before we connect to that. Just so you know, you're like, oh, Jim was sensitive to this stuff and he easily could get sucked in. And even though I'm experiencing and watching this guy change shape into different people from different incarnations of princesses and alien creatures and Buddhas and stuff like that, I'm watching him do this and growing 20 feet tall and all this other stuff.
Well, you're having an experience where you believe he's doing this.
Yeah.
But he's not doing this.
No, it's a positive hallucination?
It's a hypnotic hallucination. Yeah. Yes. And yeah, using hypnotic language, a positive hallucination is where you see something that isn't real, but you experience it as real. A negative hallucination would be where something is actually real and you make it disappear.
So there was a time where I was trying to recruit all my friends, and I was terrible at it because I hadn't been doing it for a long time. So I'm talking to my friends in college. I'm like, you got to see this guy. He's enlightened and he can make the room turn gold and he changes shape and all this, which is not what you do right away when you're trying to recruit somebody, because they're like, you are insane. What are you talking about?
Right.
And because I had done all the thought stopping, pushing out, when they would say, I read this article, I looked him up, I saw this article about this guy, he's clearly stealing money. And when they would say that, not exactly, but it would be like that's what I heard, which was nothing. And so when
that was good, I liked that. Was like
I practiced that.
That was what puppeteers do. That
ventriloquism. Yeah, but it's backwards where I wasn't saying anything. Anyway, So
That was good, though.
I
I
was
like
able
that.
to bring 3 of my friends to one of these Rama dinners, right? It's a nice dinner. They
That's a
all go,
very powerful recruiting way, by the
right,
way. It's called counter-attitudinal argumentation, where you bring new people to the cult and
right.
get them in.
And 2 of them were like, it was fine. He's funny. I don't know if I'm interested. And one of them went in saying like, this is creepy. What you described is wrong. I'm going to go anyway to check it out. So 3 of us go. This one woman who was very skeptical. At the end, she was like, this guy's a sociopath and he's stealing your money. And I was like, well, I don't know about that. And she goes, but how did he make the room turn gold and change shape and do all the things that I listed earlier? So she both didn't believe, like she was very much against this guy, but she still had the experience, which is how susceptible people can be, right? I mean,
Yeah, especially people with strong imaginations and people who are in a vulnerable hypnotic trance state where your critical faculties is offline and boom.
right.
She still had access to her critical faculties enough to go, I still think he's a charlatan and I had this experience.
Right. And if you had a lot of some people, if they were like, this guy is all wrong, but he must be right because I'm seeing this or experiencing this or hearing God or doing whatever.
Right.
So maybe I should give him a chance.
Right. Well, it's so the thing is that human beings don't like confusion. They don't like things to not make sense. And so there's an automatic system to try to resolve discrepancies and incongruities of things. And unfortunately, it can lead one in the wrong direction to the false assumption that the guy is a spiritual master and has all these supernatural powers. Or I was given drugs and I didn't know it, or I was hypnotized covertly and I didn't realize it, or any number of other explanations.
And I'm glad you said the word drugs because that's the number one thing everyone always says, like, well, you're clearly drugged. So I was even at a certain point, like, even when I was in, I was like, I got to prove to myself that I'm not being drugged because no one's experienced anything like I'm describing. And even now I talk to cult people who've talked to hundreds of people in cults and they've never heard anything like I experienced. And so I went to one meeting where Lenz Rama was talking. I didn't shake anyone's hand. I didn't sip any water. I didn't have the coffee. I didn't have the desserts. I did nothing. And I went in and it was more powerful and brighter and more shapes and, incarnations that he changed than ever before. And so I was not drugged. We know this, definitively
When I first
now.
came back from my first Mooney workshop, my mother said, you look strange. Are you on drugs? And I'm like, I don't think they gave me any drugs, and they didn't give me any drugs. But I will say I was over in Japan a couple of times on the Om Shinrikyo cult, the sarin gas cult. When they were doing initiations, they would give people psychedelics and put them in a room with flashing colored lights so that they would believe Shoko Asahara was Buddha and Jesus rolled up into one. He's dead, by the way. They hung him for his crimes.
We're sideways on Instagram. It wasn't supposed to do that. Sorry about that, everyone. Yikes. Oh my God, that must have been a very painful half hour for everyone. Hi, is that better?
You should have been on Meta.
I know, right? Well, Meta is Instagram.
I'm teasing. Whatever. Well, there'll be a video of the correct one, right? Hopefully.
Yeah. So thank you, Nancy, for letting us know.
This is an experiment. So if people like this, we can do more with other folks who are in different groups. Because the thing is, and why people have been helped so much from my books, is that when you learn about other cults, you're like, but that was just like mine. How is that possible? I had a different leader. I had a different God figure telling me what to do, etc., etc. I also want to I have a memory, Jim, that the people who became computer programmers were being told to do that because they could make a lot more money to give to Rama, and they would often fudge their CVs
all
on
the time.
purpose.
We would use
lie.
Yeah, we would use each. This is before computers, right? So anyone could lie about anything, and you couldn't really check it out, which is remarkable to think of now. But everyone would use each other as references with fake company names, but real phone numbers. And so I would say, yeah, I've done this amount of work. And we justified it by saying, because we have Rama's energy, we're definitely going to be able to pick up computer programming super fast. Like, our intention was to do great work and make a lot of money, not to fail or scam people. But we were like, but no one will hire us if we have no background. I read a couple of books on programming. So that was, you're right. So we frauded our way to the point where, and this was, I think, before or after I was in, a lot of people became like, were on a national blacklist of programmers, and they associated it with Rama's students.
Yep.
So it was like the Rama group, and it was just like, do not hire these people.
Yes. Warning, warning. And I guess I want to say we're going to upload the Dateline specials that Jim was in that outed this creep, and he eventually killed himself because he was outed. And narcissists don't like to be outed and realize that everybody thinks you're a prick and an asshole and a douchebag and a number of other colorful descriptors. So you told your mom, don't talk to the Cult Awareness Network. She immediately looked them up. She found me, I guess, or your dad did. And I was already hearing from people who'd gone to the Boston Meditation Society. I went to one myself because I always like to try to go and check out. It was in Harvard Square. And I always like to ask questions. And if you get very direct, concrete answers, it's usually a good sign that it's not a destructive cult. But they were doing the classic, you'll know when you're ready, and why don't you give it a try, and just like changing things around, turning it back on me, that I seem to be skeptical, and that says something about how closed I am to being spiritual, etc. So I met with your folks. I met with a number of your friends. They were all like, we love Jim, and he's like become weird and strange, and we don't know what to do. So I typically meet and educate people about what is brainwashing, what is mind control, hypnosis, etc. And I encourage and I teach people how to ask questions in a respectful, curious way and plant seeds. And I don't, because it was 31 years ago, I don't remember that much about it, except I remember, I think it was your stepmom was a Buddhist. Maybe.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, you're a Buddhist. Talk about Buddha, and ask questions. And really, I didn't realize she had a problem, which you were just mentioning before we started the recording. But the bottom line was people were trying to gauge you and try to sow seeds of questioning. Are you sure that this is really the best thing? Are you sure there's not a better, path for you to be spiritual, etc.? And then eventually, I don't remember how, but we got you to, was it your family's house?
No, it was best friend Bob's house in his basement.
Best friend's Bob's house.
Well, the way they did it was, you had been training them how to communicate with me
Right.
without triggering my mind control, right?
Right.
So you can't go up to someone in a cult and say, you're in a cult, right?
Or talk to the deprogrammer, Steve
Right.
Hassan.
But you can talk about an aunt who was in an abusive relationship and was under control and didn't think that they could ask for help and didn't know even
or
that they...
TM or one of these other
Right.
things.
And or Scientology, and everyone's like, oh my God, those guys are crazy. Tell me more about Scientology. So there are ways to get around that mind control block. And so Steve trained my family on how to talk to me and teach me just like very basic cognitive skills, like where there's smoke, there's fire, right? Just try to get that concept, and because you have to get retaught all of these critical thinking skills again.
Yeah, if it's legitimate, it will stand up to scrutiny.
Right.
And if it's not legitimate, why invest your time and energy and money?
And so they were hitting me, friends and family, with little messages. And Steve was like, okay, you're going to talk about blah, blah, blah. And then you're going to talk about this family member. And all of this was softening the mind control, for sure, to the point where I was getting...
building rapport and trust with you because you had time. Didn't you go away with your friends camping or something?
No, what we were going to do was... Yeah, no, you were close. We were planning a camping trip with my dad, which on the weekend that was really the exiting. And so, and I had never gone camping with my dad. So here I am, a 20-something-year-old, being like, "Oh my God, I get to go camping with dad." And so I am definitely, and I thought of it as this is going to be my goodbye trip with my dad, because they didn't know I was like 2 weeks away from disappearing forever at that point. Like that was an unknown. Like, well, maybe sometimes this group, their members just disappear, and so
The people really did because of the post office box and the beepers.
right.
People didn't know where the
Well,
heck.
that's what I was planning on doing.
Yeah, no, I know.
And so this is just sort of like divine intervention E, which is that on top of everyone hitting me with this, and I'm sitting there dizzy, right? Just like at work, I'm in a deli, and I'm literally dizzy because of my mind feeling like it's being pulled in two. That's how it felt. Is that I turned to this kid who was a freshman in college, and I was like, "Listen, I just have to vent. Can we talk after work?" So we go to his house, and I tell him everything, right? I'm like, this guy's enlightened, and da da da, and I see gold, and he goes, and he had happened to take a class, just happened to take a class on Buddhism in his semester year. And he goes, "What?" He's like, "That's amazing that you found somebody who might be enlightened. That's incredible." So what does he say about the Four Noble Truths? And I was like, "What are the Four Noble Truths?" And he says, "The basis of all versions of Buddhism all over the world." And I was like, "Oh." And he goes, "Well, tell me about what this guy teaches." And I said the part about he gives us energy, we meditate well, which helps us program computers well, so we make more money. And since we're monks and live simply, we give the money to him, so he gives us more energy and all that. And he goes, "Dude, you're in a spiritual pyramid scheme." And he's like 19 years old. And that hit me like a brick wall. And I said, like, there were two parts of me. Both parts were saying there's something wrong, deeply wrong with this situation, but I couldn't articulate it yet. So I go home that night knowing I'm going to go camping with my dad the next morning. And I wake up and I'm like making myself some cereal, and my best friend Bob is standing in my living room. And I was like, "You're here to deprogram me." And he was like, "That's right." And I was like, "All right, let's go." And so we go to his house, and there are my friends and family, and Steve, and a couple of ex-members of Rama's cult.
Well, let me just say I never agree to meet anyone unless they voluntarily agree to meet me. So
I think that's why Bob was there, just to go, "Listen, guy, you gotta
we want you to meet to get some other points of view before you go off on this thing. We just want to empower you."
Right.
But for sure, I didn't just show up, and because typically people run out the door if they don't agree
Right.
that they're open
100%.
to it. So my recollection, because I'm looking at the clock, and we could talk for another 2 hours, I think, but we have about 17, 18 minutes. My recollection is that I asked you something like, "So tell me, Jim, what was it that made you decide to commit your life
It was that,
to Rama?"
well, I wanted someone who was, I mean, I didn't know that I wanted a guru, I wanted a leader that was spiritual, but alternative and irreverent, right? Who was just sort of like, he was that, I mean, from what I remember, he was that funny, clever, the world is screwed up in a funny way, and this is the way that you can get real magic, like Harry Potter magic, and a sense of accomplishment. And you're gonna, but then the head of the nail, the nail in the coffin,
Nail on the head.
nail in that, whatever, was the glowing gold. Like when I saw the glowing gold, that was 100% proof, because no one can just do that. So I was like, "That's it, I'm in." That was it.
And you shared that when we were talking earlier about that meeting where it was like, "That's it, I'm in." So I asked you, you said, "Yeah, the glowing, gold," which I knew from having listened to the meditation tape and talking with former members. And I want to say this, especially for people who are therapists who are trying to help other people to get out. I've learned over the decades to never attack a person's spiritual beliefs or practices head on, because it's not respectful. And who am I to say that someone didn't have a spiritual experience? Because I don't know everything. But what I do is I offer alternative explanations, possible explanations to the phenomenon. So, for example, when I work with Mormons, I don't know if you know this, Jim, but they talk about a burning in the bosom. It's a kinesthetic feeling in their chest that proves that the Latter-day Saints are God's chosen church. Other groups have other types of experiences. So when you said the glowing gold, my recollection is I said, I've studied hypnosis.
To me, when we
to
were having the
you
exiting,
with your family and your friends in the room. And with hypnosis, the mind is capable of seeing and experiencing things that aren't there, but you feel like they're real. And would you consider that that's what you experienced? You said, nope, not at all. And I'm like, well, I think that there's a good likelihood that that's what happened. And you did what no one has done in 47 years. You said, prove it. And I was like to myself, holy shit, what do I do now?
And we have two slightly different versions of what we remember 32 years ago what happened.
It was a light bulb memory for me, because it was like, holy mackerel, the room's filled with people. I said this thing. Jim said this to me. Now what do I do? And I just went for it. And I said to you, this is my recollection, then you'll share your remembrance, and probably both are right. But I said something like, okay, Jim, I want you to meditate the way Rama taught you to meditate. And you closed your eyes. And I deliberately did not want to use my hypnotic velvet voice. So it's kind of like this, to talk like this. I deliberately just wanted to keep my conversational voice. And I said, I want you to meditate deeper than you've ever done before. And then I did what's called a double bind in hypnotic language. I said, and I don't want you to open your eyes until you're fully ready to see an even brighter light coming from me. So what I was saying is, dude, you're going to be stuck with your eyes closed for eternity. Or you have the option to open your eyes.
And see the light. Yeah.
And guess what? You open your eyes, you were like, whoa, that's even brighter than Rama. That's it. I'm out.
Yeah. So
everyone who went around the room was like, holy shit. And
so
you're like, I want to get my friends out.
Yeah,
that was the next thing you said.
Yeah. So
your turn.
It's funny that I got in because of the gold light, and I got out because of the proving. The gold light. But it came from me. Right.
And that wasn't for me.
Right. So the nuance that I remember is that, if I remember correctly, is Steve said, well, it could be replicated, or actually it's created through a hypnotic state. And I said, and you said, and
I've studied hypnosis.
Yeah, studied hypnosis. So like, I'd be able to do that. And I said, oh yeah, prove it. Right. It's like that. And so he had me close my eyes and all that stuff. But I also heard like him going, like as if I'm being hypnotized by what he's saying. This is what I remember. And then I come out of it, I see the gold, and I said, what did you just say to hypnotize me to see this? And Steve, in my recollection, says, I was mumbling, you did it yourself. And it was just like, oh my God, so it's like,
I want to ask everyone else who was in the room what their recollection is.
We'll figure that out
later.
That
is fascinating. But, it's 31 years ago. The important thing is that, my whole approach is to empower people to think for themselves, to understand how the mind works, to understand social psychology, and so they can make informed choices. Do you really want to drop out of college with 4 courses to go?
Yeah, Jesus.
And cut off from your family and friends forever and work with this creepy guy?
But at the time, it seemed like a great idea.
Of course.
So Steve, we have a couple of questions from the audience.
We do.
Let's see. All right. Yeah. Well, we did talk about how similar cult tactics are across the board, right? They're the same, except that very similar, but their mythology of what they're talking about, whether it's about Jesus or empowerment or selling vitamin packets or whatever, they're all very similar in terms of how they work.
Spiritual pyramid scheme was a good one.
Yeah.
MLMs or pyramid schemes where you think you're going to make a fortune or become enlightened.
Well, I mean, when you recruit people, that's like karma points. You go up the level based on, right? I mean, it's kind of this pyramid scheme. Well, one question was why all the programmers, what's his objective? It was just fast money. Like, I think he believed that computers were the future, and of course they were. He wasn't a genius because of that. But he could see that, oh, we could sneak in, say that we do whatever. Most of my people are nerds anyway, and they'll learn how to do it on their own because they're going to work on it 18 hours a day, and then he gets the most amount of money. I mean,
And I think they were working on some type of computer software or program
yeah, and
to
it was
sell.
just,
I
yeah,
don't
it was
know.
supposed to be artificial intelligence, and
But
it was really just an ordinary
And I
app.
remember from the Dateline, and I'm forgetting the ex-member's name, who was a wonderful musician, and he would be like taking credit for the compositions, and it was
Yeah,
totally.
you can see that on the Dateline NBC. Like,
We'll put up the link
yeah,
to.
it's so funny.
It's really worth
and
watching.
Lenz is sitting there talking to the guitarist as he's doing a solo, and he goes, "Okay, now play funky. Okay, now funkier." And it's just sort of like, oh, that's definitely composing music. All right, so this one is going to
That's
be.
why he killed himself.
This is a softball for Steve. What is your number one advice for someone who's leaving a cult to prevent cult hopping?
Learn and process, your experience. And people can start by reading this book and taking notes, and then freedom of mind. I have a course that's online. But the critical thing is being aware of the influence continuum and the bite model, and going back to your experience. Were you born in a cult? In which case you're probably going to need to do a bit more work than I needed to do. I was 19 when I was in. I was 22 when I came out, because I had an identity to go back to, and a loving family and a group of friends to help. But yeah, the critical thing is if something's legitimate, it will stand up to scrutiny, become a great consumer, and you're not alone. We're building a community of former members and people who really care about this work, and clinicians. So if it's legitimate, it'll stand up to scrutiny.
So here's one that I want to say a little bit. Okay, did you find the aesthetics of your respective group was apart from the cult influence? For instance, why do so many of these groups have eccentric clothing? And I would go so far as to say those are just the ones you've noticed. We had ordinary outfits. Most cults, their members wear normal clothes, have families, go to work, pay their bills. You would never know that they're in a cult.
Yeah, I had a three-piece suit when I was lecturing on Fifth Avenue for the Moonies. Otherwise, it was just trousers and pants. I did cut my ponytail off when I was in the cult.
But I mean,
got rid of my blue jeans and my work boots.
And talking about you had a suit, but that was different than what you normally wore. So it was
totally.
So it was behavior control in a way, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's where the bite model really is very helpful, to go through the entire list. And
so Steve has a bite model, which is a chart which shows you, which you can work through to find out.
I did my doctoral dissertation on. This is you can download this for free on my website, Freedom of Mind, and this is the frame, so that if you want to understand mind control cults, the more BITE, behavior, information, thought, and emotion control, you can self-identify. Hey,
because it's on a continuum. You might be like, oh, my church makes me feel guilty, but otherwise it's fine.
So it may not be all or nothing. It might be in the middle there, but at least you'll be a good consumer.
Right. Let's see. We answered that. And why all the programmers? We said that, and then that. Okay.
Somebody's talking about be careful about psychedelics. So psychedelics is something I've been spending a lot of time researching and understanding. And psychedelics put you in an altered state of mind and make you incredibly susceptible, where if you don't have a good therapist or you have some self-designated shaman, they can molest you and convince you that you're an alien in human form or anything else.
And it goes right into the subconscious, I would imagine.
It really does. And so I really want to warn people, it's your mind, it's precious. It's your mind, it's your body. And you're at a party and someone hands you a pill. You don't know what the hell that is. Don't take it. Don't, please. You're drinking punch. It's like, did anyone put anything in there? Oh, it's vodka? Okay, I'll have one sip. or not. But you don't want electrified punch and
You'll
trip for 2 days.
This will be a good one for you. What do you think about hypnosis as a treatment for trauma, CPTSD? Question mark.
So I just posted a blog with the lead editor, Julie Linden, of the. Can you hand me the big book that's there, the Rutledge? Anyway, we may not be able to find it quickly, but there's a new textbook that just came out on clinical hypnotherapy, and it's by clinicians. It's mental health professionals. That's it. If you go to my website, you will see my interview with Julie Linden about this. I do not practice hypnotherapy with my clients deliberately because I want people to trust me. I don't want them thinking Steve doing a pattern on me or something. But I teach my clients about hypnosis and what it is and what it isn't, how to protect themselves. And I encourage people to learn self-hypnosis techniques, to relax themselves, to concentrate, to be a better performer, as well as to help use hyperplasticity to rewire their cult identity and counsel their younger self out of the cult. And I typically do simple stuff like, hey, Jim, when you first were approached, if you knew then what you know now, what would you say and do differently?
Right.
What would you say?
Oh, if I knew,
when you first saw the Boston Meditation Society thing, you went back to the younger Jim and you know what you know now, what would you say and do differently?
Well, I would explain how like the difference between a healthy organization and one that's prepping you up to be in a recruitment, and it's just like, well, let's try it, and then we'll put up what they're saying up to a kind of standard, and then ask critical questions like, are there things I'm going to find out about later? So I think.
Well, let's go back to that New York thing, and
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing the gold light. What would you say to the younger you, knowing what you know now?
Well, a couple of things, which is if something is too good to be true, it probably is, right?
Right.
And then the other thing is just like, yes, this feels really good, but this is actually a hypnotic state. One thing that you told me, and I might be remembering, this is actually really critical. I had read before the cult, a line that when you're being hypnotized, there's a part of your brain that stops you from doing something that you otherwise wouldn't want to do, like harm yourself or harm someone else.
That's not correct.
And what you told me, if I remember correctly, was just sort of like, oh, what you want to do? Well, what if I hypnotize you to think that you're on fire and you're feeling the fire, and I show you from 10 floors above that there's a pool down there? What do you want to do? And it was just like, oh my God. So it's not so much you're telling someone to do something, you're shifting to what
you're changing the frames.
You're changing
right.
the frame.
You can say, you would never kill someone, but if I said if you were in a play and your character needed to use a toy gun and shoot somebody on the stage, would you do it? You'd be, of course.
Yeah.
Except it was a real gun.
Right.
And then you'd kill somebody.
Right.
So that's where you can trick the mind without that reality testing. That's why it's so important to have people in your life that you trust, that people who are grounded and have good values and care about you, the real you, and don't have an agenda to convert you or change you into something else.
Well, we just have a few more minutes if we do go over. I don't know if this cuts us off after an hour, but one last question. Can you have more online cult followers on to discuss? There are thousands of online cults now. I don't think most people know they're in a cult.
Yes, and yes, and yes. And, especially since COVID, more and more people are being recruited and radicalized online than in real life. So YouTube and algorithms and QAnon and conspiracy theories, they're all over the place. And people are being told, oh, let's do a guided visualization. Well, no, it's called hypnosis. Or there's a rage on the internet of ASMR, where people are talking.
Oh, right. And then and
it's really quiet. And if you stay and listen for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, you go into an altered state. There's no way you can do that. And so you have to say, this is my life, this is my time. I don't want to be on this app more than 5 minutes. I'm going to set an alarm and promise myself when the alarm goes off, I'm not staying. I'm just getting off.
Well, in terms of having discussions with other people, I just want to plug your YouTube channel under Dr. Stephen Hassan, Freedom of Mind. And so if you go to YouTube and type in Stephen Hassan, you'll see his channel. And then you have dozens and dozens and dozens of interviews.
And blogs and my Influence Continuum podcast on Midas Touch. And if you haven't read the updated Combating with 1T,
Combating Cult Mind Control.
Yes, I would encourage you to revisit it. Even though you're out of the cult, it will read differently, I promise you, because it's very different.
And I'm giving him a lot of kudos. We've known each other for years. We've been friends for years after that. So I'm a big fan of Steve's and his work and everything.
And I'm a big fan of Jim's, who's a very talented, creative artist who does incredible documentaries and shorts, and you're funny and creative. And so I'm very grateful that you're in my life.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks for doing this, everybody. And apologies to Instagram if we were sideways.
And if you missed the first half or 20 minutes and you're like, wow, this is really, really good. We're going to post this on YouTube. Well, you could probably, once we stop, you can go back and watch it again. But we're also, I think, going to post this on YouTube. And
I hope so.
Yeah, and we can have more of these with
Went
other people.
really fast.
I know.
Awesome.
It was fun.
We'll have to do this again.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See ya. Oh, no, you don't hit that. There we go. Great.
Do you want to share it?